60 Minutes Overtime.
Has Russia just completely abandoned the laws of war?
It feels that way. Operations seem to be launched with the goal of maximizing the civilian harm rather than minimizing the civilian harm, which is what the laws of war demand.
Why would that be?
I think it's an effort to ultimately win the war by virtue of wearing down the Ukrainian people, whose resoluteness has been remarkable in the face of these attacks.
This week on 60 Minutes, we take a look at Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine and the toll against Ukraine's civilians. When the horrors of war play out on screens every day, it can be easy to forget that deliberately targeting civilians is a war crime. Yet, as peace talks ricochet between the parties, Russia continues to launch missiles that tear through Ukrainian cities. An attack this last spring seems to capture the essence of Russia's strategy in Ukraine. The crimes you're about to see are hard to watch. While residents of the city of Sumy gathered to worship on Palm Sunday, Russian missiles shattered the morning. The missiles struck Sumy State University's conference center and a bus of civilians. Altogether, 35 civilians were killed, including 2 children, while another 145 were wounded.
In many respects, that attack in Sumy is emblematic of what we have seen across Ukraine in connection with Russia's brutal war of aggression in the country.
Beth Van Skok was, until recently, the U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice. She directed American support for Ukraine's war crime investigations.
Well, for one, the attack appears to be an attack on civilians and the civilian infrastructure, with the ultimate goal of terrorizing the Ukrainian people into submission. They come up with an information alibi and claim they had a military objective in their sights, and yet the weapons they use are fundamentally inappropriate for such an attack against a military objective. And what you see is tremendous death and destruction within the civilian population.
What are the elements of the crime in Sumy?
Well, the fundamental rule of war is the principle of distinction that says parties should not launch attacks against civilians, but only against combatants and military objectives. You're also going to be looking for whether or not there were military objectives in the vicinity that might have been a lawful target. And then you have the use of entirely inappropriate weapons systems for an urban battle space and a densely civilian populated area. And then the lack of any precautions to protect the civilian population. It's a busy morning, it's a holiday morning, people are traveling to church, and that's the moment that they choose to launch this attack. So those are the types of elements you're looking for to make a distinction between a lawful act of war and a war crime.
Palm Sunday in Ukraine is called Willow Sunday. Palms don't grow in the Eastern European country, but willows do. They're one of the first buds of spring. So like Easter itself, the plant symbolizes life, overcoming death. But this year, some of Ukraine's faithful met another fate.
Мама дуже в мене гарна, хороша жінка, я її дуже люблю.
That Sunday, Oksana Bondarenko's mother was walking to church, willow branches in hand, when she was killed by shrapnel from the Russian missile strike. The Russians always say that they attack only military targets.
Да, і тому вони, напевне, вдарили по центру міста, де йшли батьки з дітьми, де йшла моя мама-пенсіонер, яка йшла світити гілочки. Ця країна для моєї родини вже в 4-му поколінні робить таке зло, яке я навіть уявити не можна. Я думаю, навіть в аду б їм би боялись би їх, що вони творять.
There's been a great deal of diplomacy recently, and I wonder what you think of that process.
Я не знаю, для мене завжди важливий не процес, а результат. Тому що кожна хвилина, які вони відтягують, щось рішають, це чиє життя. Це чиясь мама, чиясь дитина, чийсь брат, чиясь жінка, чийсь сусід. Так? Це моя країна, це не тільки моя країна. Вони не розуміють, що коли, не дай Бог, але так трапиться, закінчимося ми, то почнуться вже інші країни. Це життя. Життя, воно не має часу, тому що кожну хвилину хтось вмирає. Так?
Who bears the responsibility?
Ultimately, it goes all the way up the chain of command to President Putin himself, but to the other leadership within his close inner circle.
Some of these other Russians who have arrest warrants issued against them at this moment, what have they been accused of?
They've been accused of both war crimes and crimes against humanity, mostly in connection with deliberate attacks against civilians and the civilian infrastructure, with a particular emphasis on the energy infrastructure.
What are the chances that there would ever be prosecutions, that we would ever see any of these people in a courtroom?
This is the fundamental challenge. As long as these individuals remain protected by Russia, the ICC cannot move forward, and most cases happening in many domestic courts around the world cannot move forward. There are no in absentia trials in the ICC. So those arrest warrants will sit forever waiting to be executed upon.